So, some of our considerations based on the readings and our discussions as a group are first, as a society, how have we treated children who have experienced trauma? Now, Baker and Cunningham point out perceptions of trauma onto young people. Experience has a huge impact on how someone reacts to and deals with trauma. So, on a personal level, for example, the story of how Malika and her brother reacting differently to their father's abuse really struck me because I found myself approving of Malika's reaction of anger and blame towards her violent father, and I found myself feeling disappointed in her younger brother's almost protection and victim blaming, blaming the mother and sort of protecting the father. Now, obviously, this is a very inappropriate reaction as an adult and especially as an educator, but it's definitely tough to kind of remove your personal feelings from interventions and trying to assist victims of abuse. Another sort of issue that we found in Baker and Cunningham's reading is the assumption that if a child doesn't see or hear anything, then they're not affected by family violence. But as we saw in Stern's autobiography, she still wonders to this day as an adult what happened while she was in the shower to cause the fight to escalate between her mother and Eric. And finally, the need for society and adults to acknowledge the layers of trauma that can affect children. So sometimes our attempts at intervention can actually be more traumatic for a child than the initial violence. For example, forcing a child to talk about an incident if they don't want to, trying to make them fear their father or another loved one, or just removal from the home can be very traumatic. We need to acknowledge that we need to include children in their own narratives on family violence. For example, young children process conflict differently than adolescents, so allowing them to internalize their experiences according to their stage of moral development. Allowing them to cope in their own way, even if it's not something that we necessarily would feel is a coping mechanism. And finally, and I would argue most importantly, is avoid using victimized children as pawns or tools for political motives. And we will address this issue specifically for one of our discussions for this week. So you'll get a little bit more information in a upcoming slide.